James was an experienced sailor, accustomed to long voyages and storms that could frighten anyone. But this time his journey was especially lonely. His ship sailed through quiet, endless waters where no other ships or land were visible. One night, as he stood on the deck, looking at the starry sky and listening to the splash of the waves, something unusual reached his ears. It was singing, a gentle, enchanting melody that seemed to come from the very depths of the ocean. James strained his ears, trying to catch the words, but there were none. It was pure, almost unearthly music that pierced him to the very heart. "What can that be?" he muttered, but no one on board could answer him. The crew had long since fallen asleep, and he was the only one who heard this strange sound. The next night the singing was repeated, and James decided to write down the melody. He took a notebook and began carefully typing out notes, listening to each wave of sounds that seemed sad and beautiful at the same time. But the longer he listened, the more he felt as if the singing was addressed specifically to him, as if the ocean knew his name, knew his thoughts, and was calling him closer. With each passing day, the singing grew louder. It was no longer a faint murmur, but now filled the entire silence of the night, as if the sea itself was breathing this melody. James felt each note penetrate his consciousness, captivating him and drawing him closer to the side of the ship. One night, standing on the deck with a notebook in his hands, he felt a light wind rise, and the singing became very close. James looked over the side and saw something that made his heart clench. Figures were rising from the water. At first they were only vague outlines, but soon he saw that they were women. Their hair flowed down their shoulders as if woven from the water itself, and their eyes shone with a cold light. Their faces were too perfect to be real, and their smiles hid something dark, predatory. They called him without words, only with their eyes and the movement of their hands, as if inviting him to come down to them. Their voices merged into one melody, which sounded louder and louder, filling his mind. James felt his feet begin to move towards the edge of the side of the boat on their own. He no longer thought about the melody, did not think about the ship or the crew, only about the need to be closer to these creatures. "We are waiting for you," the melody seemed to say. When James stopped at the very edge of the side, the waves flashed with silver light. The figures rose higher, and now he could see them completely. Their arms were too long, their fingers too thin, and their eyes too empty, despite their light. He wanted to step, but something inside him still resisted. His gaze fell on the notebook in which he wrote the melody. The notes he had so carefully written were now tangled, as if someone else was guiding his hand. Each note seemed like a strange sign, as if it was not just a sound but a spell. "Who are you?" James breathed out. But the only answer was the song, which was getting louder. Now it sounded not only outside, but also inside his head, filling all the space, leaving only one desire: to be with them. The sound of their presence made Claire reach over and grab his hand. "What do you want?" she asked. The night was as quiet as ever. The singing was spreading over the water, as if the sea itself was whispering to him. But now, it was no longer just a sound. It had become part of his thoughts, filling them to the brim. James stood at the side of the boat, his hands clutching the railings, but his heart was beating as if it were about to fall. This time, the figures in the water were closer than ever. Their faces shimmered in the moonlight, and their eyes glowed with a cold, mesmerizing gleam. "You belong to us," the sea seemed to whisper. James no longer felt afraid. The song he had been writing was complete, and he knew it was more than just a melody. It was a calling he had to fulfill. The figures raised their hands, as if inviting him. James took a step forward, feeling his body grow light, his thoughts dissolving. "I'm coming," he whispered, and the next moment his feet were off the deck. He jumped. The water was icy, but he didn't feel the cold. Instead, silence surrounded him. Then, a song filled him from within. Figures surrounded him, their eyes so empty and cold, looking straight into his soul. When he looked at his hands, they began to change. The skin became transparent, the water slid over him, became part of his being. His voice, trembling at first, soon joined the general chorus. Now he knew the melody, knew the words, although before they were incomprehensible to him. He became one of them, Zebetosha. The next day the ship was found empty, drifting in silence. The crew had disappeared without a trace, and on the deck lay James's notebook. Instead of the melody he had written, the pages were covered with signs resembling the symbols of an ancient language. Those who passed by these waters later told of a strange song that echoed in the night, and of figures that called them to themselves, shimmering in the depths of the sea.